Dr. Matt Mowlem is Head of Ocean Technology and Engineering at the National Oceanographic Centre. Dr. Mowlem, you're faced with the interesting challenge of putting instruments on a human research vessel. What problems does this pose?
So a human can't take that much weight, so typically a scientific quality instrumentation set is several kilos, maybe tens of kilos, and some of them even hundreds of kilos, and we just can't put that on board a human swimmer. Also, a human swimmer moves in a unique way. They're also warm, so trying to make temperature measurements from a person is difficult. You have to consider where you're putting the sensor. You don't want to get in the flow coming off the body. So really it's about size and positioning of the sensor, and the technology has to fit around that problem.
So how have you gone about solving these problems?
Well, primarily we use microfabrication, so we're making very small sensors. We're using advanced cleanroom techniques such as photolithography to make a very, very small sensor. That enables us to make the sort of quality of measurements you'd get from a much larger instrument in a small enough sensor to go on a human body. And we're coping with the motion by making a very robust sensor. We've done a lot of work to make sure that if anything comes within proximity of our sensor, which measures salinity via conductivity and temperature, also dissolved oxygen, if anything comes in close proximity to our sensor, it doesn't disturb the reading. So unless the swimmer actually puts their finger on the sensor, then we should still be getting valid readings, certainly for conductivity and for oxygen. Temperature is a little bit more difficult, and we're going to have to experiment with the location of the sensor to make sure it's not in the slipstream from the swimmer. Hopefully there are also some things we can do around clothing to try and minimize the amount of heat coming off the body. So that's what we're doing.
So what sort of impact has this had generally on the sort of techniques that you're developing?
Well, it's really forced us to accelerate our program. We've developed sensor technology. We're already putting it on quite large buoys. We've put it on vehicles that are going underwater, but we've had to really progress the miniaturization and consider some of these additional issues. So it's brought forward what we were planning to do anyway, and it gives us great profile. So it means that we're going to have sensors that are really very, very small, of high quality in terms of their measurements, sooner than we expected to do.
And what's the importance of this to the wider research community?
The problem with oceanography at the moment is that there just aren't enough measurements. The ocean's a very large and dynamic environment with some changes that you see over very, very small scales. So typically we're making measurements of subsurface temperature and salinity from research vessels or and surface measurements from satellites. The problem is that surface satellite data isn't very well calibrated, and you need an in situ component. You need a sensor actually in the water to calibrate those things. So you get a lot more data than you would by going out from a ship, and hopefully we can provide some calibrations for these satellite measurements. The current technology, most of the data comes from profiling floats that don't actually measure in the top few meters of the ocean. So it's actually quite a good thing to have a swimmer that's right at the surface if we can get around these issues of the temperature coming off the body.
Matt, thank you very much.